Welcome back, everyone, to the Thought Therapy Podcast. We are a combat Marine and a teen mom who are dedicated to drawing connections between cutting-edge research and ancient spiritual practices to help people like us rewire their subconscious mind so that we can break free from limiting beliefs and thought habits that are no longer serving us. I'm Jake Worthington, and as always, Carissa Ferns.
Hello, you guys. We have missed you. It's been a couple of weeks since Jake and I have recorded, so we're super excited to get back and give you guys some information today on microdosing. So go ahead, honey.
Microdosing.
Like you seemed like you wanted to say something. So this is an important topic to both of us. I think I can speak for Jake on that one. Really important for me. I love microdosing. It has given me, I can truly say it's given me the life that I have today. And many times in my content, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook or with my students and in the courses that I teach, I always say microdosing not only saved my life, but it actually gave me the life today. And before I get into kind of my story and then Jake's story, first, I want to at least tell you, I want to educate you guys a little bit. If you don't know what microdosing is, let's start with that. So microdosing, what we're talking about today is microdosing on psilocybin. You can microdose on a couple different things, but we are primarily talking about microdosing on psilocybin. Psilocybin is the main ingredient found in magic mushrooms. And when I first heard that, I was very scared because I might be a drinker. Not anymore, obviously. Jake and I are both sober. But I always liked alcohol. I always preferred alcohol. I always liked the feeling of alcohol. I liked the feeling of being intoxicated. I mean, clearly, right? And so I was never into psychedelics. You know, like in high school when weed was introduced to me, when alcohol was introduced to me, psychedelics were introduced to me, and I had no desire. I didn't even have any curiosity. I was not curious at all. I was like, hallucinate? I'm good. Thank you. Bye. Like, no. And I never learned anything about any psychedelic because it was out of my mind. Like I wasn't interested. So I think I was really blessed in that regard because I never had the opportunity to abuse psychedelics. I never had the opportunity to abuse magic mushrooms, nothing. So I was so stoked. And it wasn't until 33. So I got sober I got sober at 22, but I couldn't stay sober until I hit 32. And then at 33, psychedelics were introduced to me from my partner that I had before, Jake. I was so fortunate for him because he introduced them to me in a very healing way. I was 1 year sober and I was on 6 different prescription pills. You guys will hear me talk about that a lot because it is my story. I was on 6 different prescription pills. I was on, antidepressants. I was on Wellbutrin, Adderall, Trazodone, Seroquel, Lamictal. There's another one I can't remember. Gabapentin for pain. And so right around like my late 30s, I started to intuitively know these pills weren't working for me. I started to intuitively know that these pills were harming me. I didn't know what to do, right? I didn't know what to do. I definitely had an emotional regulation disorder. I started to be aware that I was a little bit crazy. And I don't mean that like in a bad way, like I'm talking shit on myself because I don't talk shit on myself. And if I do, I nip that shit in the bud real quick or Jake will help me. But I mean that in the sense of I was aware that I was very reactive. I was aware that I had anger. I was aware that I might get too mad for the particular life stimulus. Like I started to become aware of that, of like, this person cuts me off in traffic and now the rest of my day's ruined because of that. Like it's not quote unquote normal, right? Or at least I didn't want it to be my normal. I didn't want that. I didn't want to be like that. I wanted to have an experience of like, wow, I didn't appreciate what this human did to me, but we're both living on earth and just go about my day. But these things just started to like bog me down, right? Like a boyfriend and I would break up and it was like doomsday and it's the end of the world and I'm dying alone. But I started to realize like, okay, that's not normal thinking. Like what needs to happen here? So my point is I knew I needed some help mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I started to understand that by my late 30s. And I didn't want to turn to Western medicine, but I didn't know what else was out there. And I don't know if most people are like this. I don't know if I was super duper indoctrinated because my dad's a doctor. I just started to be willing to think outside of the box. I started to be willing to accept that there might be other alternatives, right? Like it doesn't have to be Big Pharma. It doesn't have to be AA. It doesn't have to be Carissa's way. It could be other ways, right? Because at the time that was my way. So I started to just be willing and open to new information. Thank God. Because those 6 pills that I was on, they were about to put me on a 7th prescription pill, right? As that happens, because one pill usually gives you a side effect in another area. And so I kept getting put on more and more prescription pills because I would get another symptom and then they'd give me a pill for the symptom, because pharmaceutical pills only treat the symptom. They do not treat root causes of illness.
Because there's no profitability in treating symptoms or in curing. There's no profitability in curing.
Correct. So Big Pharma, they're in it for profit first, and then the healing second, if really at all. I don't know. But because we can buy stocks, in certain pharmaceutical companies, what that tells me is, oh, okay, so they're in it. It's a for profit first, and then for people. So then I started to kind of be really aware of that, of like, oh, so the doctors make more and more money with each pill they put me on. Got it. Like, oh, the doctor, and it's not necessarily the doctor's fault because they are so indoctrinated themselves. Big Pharma owns our medical schools. And so they literally write the textbooks, right? So they're teaching the doctors, hey, if you have a patient come in with heartburn, you give them Prilosec, right? That's treating the symptom. The doctor isn't necessarily trained to go, okay, well, what are you eating? What are you consuming on a daily basis? Why is there so much heat in the stomach? Maybe you need to remove spicy food. I would remove spicy food from a diet before I would be put on a prescription pill, right? But unfortunately, here in America, we're so indoctrinated to kind of just bow down and trust the white coat and not do our own research. And I don't want to be judgmental towards that because I was one of those people. I just had a symptom and then I would listen to whatever my dad said or whatever the doctor said. Like when I had migraines in my 20s, I was just taking pills for the migraine instead of asking, Carissa, why do you have the migraine? What is going on? If you break a bone, the bone heals. If you get a scratch, the scratch heals over. The body innately heals. So if something is going on, we need to figure it out. Are you not drinking enough water? Is that why you're having consistent headaches? Do you have something in your diet that needs to be removed? Right? So I started to understand in my early 30s, late 20s, that my body was just communicating to me that she couldn't speak English and she couldn't say, hey, the gluten that you're eating is giving us migraines. Remove the gluten and the migraines will go away. So I started finding, and I am gluten free because I was getting migraines and stomach issues. So I started to switch my thinking from let me just treat my problem symptomatically to I want to treat my problems by the root cause. I started to get really, really, really curious of what the root cause was, and I became willing to make lifestyle changes so that I wasn't dependent on these pills, right? Imagine being 20 years old and you're on 6 different prescription pills. Like I was like, oh, this is a recipe for disaster. I'm going to be heavily medicated the rest of my life unless I make some big changes. So I got into enough pain to make those changes. And fortunately today, pain does not have to be a motivator for me to change my ways. And I'm very fortunate for that. So I wanted to explain a little backstory to get back to microdosing. So my ex-partner, his name was Drew, and he introduced me to this whole world of psychedelics. And I'm so grateful for him because what he did was he didn't tell me to do psychedelics to heal. He provided me with the research. He was like, no. Go visit Johns Hopkins University for psychedelic clinical trials. And so I did, right? I'm like Googling this stuff and I'm watching, some of the videos that he recommended. And I'm like, holy shit, like mind blown. There's a whole world out there. There's a whole world of holistic healing. There's a whole world of our alternative medicine. I found Ayurvedic medicine. I found Chinese medicine. I found plant medicine. I found so many things only because I made the decision to be open. Just the decision to be open. Like, oh, okay, let me just check that out. Like maybe there's something here. And my God, there was something there. So I started reading about microdosing on psilocybin. I was reading you can microdose on LSD. I don't think one is better than the other. Microdosing psilocybin seems to be a lot more popular, a lot more prevalent, and that's what happened to work the best for me. So the definition of microdosing is taking a very low dose of psilocybin. It needs to be so low that it's unlikely to produce any type of whole body effects. But it is high enough for a cellular response to take place. So it's not there to alter your perception, but it is altering you at a cellular level, which is what is so amazing, because I didn't want to trip. I didn't want to be out of it. I was newly sober. I'd only been sober about a year, so I definitely did not want to be impaired. I was repairing the relationship with my daughter, with my family, with myself, and that desire, to drink and get fucked up was removed, but I didn't want to be on the pills. So I looked it up. So happy I did. I tried it, and it was like a night and day difference. Oh my God. So what I did was I tried, actually in the beginning, I didn't even have the capsules that we have now. I just took a little bit of mushrooms and kind of like crushed it up and then drank it, and it was really gross, which I don't recommend doing. Now it is so prevalent that there's capsules that you can get, making it a lot easier, but it's basically, it's 1/10 of a trip dose, which would be a gram generally. So you have 1/10 of a gram ground up into a little capsule. And it's like a fraction of the normal dose. And it is generally subperceptual. And what that means is it works similar to an antidepressant, meaning like you take your antidepressant and nothing happens to you, right? You don't get happy, sad, glad, nothing happens to you, but you think that it's working. And some people, antidepressants do work, and that's totally fine. They didn't work on me. But it's the same concept, right? So you want to take such a low dose that you can still go about your day. You can still tend to your children. Nothing has really shifted in that regard, but neuroplasticity is taking place. And what neuroplasticity is that is the human brain's ability to reorganize and regrow new neural networks based off new information. And the amazing thing about this is why people who microdose heal so rapidly. It is like a quantum leap in your life when you start microdosing because of the science of neuroplasticity. And so let's say we have like this. So I'll go back to me. So 5 years ago, when I first started microdosing, I didn't think very high of myself, right? I had lost custody of my daughter from my alcoholism. I pushed everybody I knew away from me, and I was in a dark night of the soul, right? There was pain and there was suffering, but there was also hope, and there was gratitude, and there was so much. So I took my first microdose, and I remember feeling in my body, more connected to Mother Earth. I remember feeling more connected to Mother Nature. I remember having the urge to want to go outside and just feel the wind, let the sun hit my skin. Very primal. That's a good word. There was very primal instincts. My primal instincts came out. That's what it was. I had an urge to eat cleaner. I had the urge to be calmer. It puts you in a place of homeostasis, or harmony is a good one. The sky was a little bit bluer, the grass was a little bit greener, the trees were just a little bit more beautiful. And I had this sense of calm. I had this sense of peace, and I had this major sense of awareness, which was so fucking rad, because I don't think I was aware of myself, my body, my emotions, my thoughts, or anybody else for that matter, pretty much my whole life, because I just lived in survival mode. And so because I was on those 6 different prescription pills, I used it intentionally to get off those 6 prescription pills. I want to be very clear that it's not safe, you guys, to be on Big Pharma and microdosing unless it's temporary, because you're doing it intentionally to wean off of those. So there were some times the pills, I wouldn't take Wellbutrin and then take a microdose. I wouldn't do that. When I say both, I mean I was weaning off, and so I cut my prescriptions down in half, and I started to wean off those prescription pills slowly, intentionally. I had a sponsor at the time. I let my sponsor know. I was really fortunate that I had a psychiatrist who was really, really open to plant medicine. and I had a therapist open to plant medicine. So I had support. I wasn't doing this alone. I wasn't doing this in shame. Like, well, let me microdose while I'm still in AA and like not tell everybody, like, no, fuck no, that's going to fuck you up. You can't stand tall and do these things if you choose to do so. Don't do them in shame or in secret, because that is not going to serve you. And I knew I was going to be up a little against a little bit of a fight, because I was in AA at the time. Using anything was very much a no-no. So I had to trust my own intellect. I had to trust my own intuition. I had to trust my God and what was right for me. And so anyways, I told my sponsor what I was doing, and she was semi-supportive. She was not supportive, but she wasn't fully supportive either. It was just kind of like, well, let's give it a try. I'm so grateful I did. So I got off my prescription pills. It took me about a whole year to like really wean off everything. I took a really long time, which if you guys are listening to me and you guys if this is resonating and you are thinking to yourself, oh, I want to do the same, I want you guys to do this with support. You can work with Jake and I. We're both coaches. We take people through this. I have a new course coming up called Microdose to Manifest. That starts in about 2 weeks. And if you're interested, please either comment below on YouTube or Spotify, wherever you're watching this, or send us an email directly at Carissa@loveyourselfagain.com. But if you are interested in doing this, I want you to do it slow, to do it guided. Don't rush yourself. There has been multiple times. I think there's been 3 times in the past, 38, 32, in the past 6 years, 5 years, since I've gotten off antidepressants and a mood stabilizer. There has been times where I've had to get back on. So I can't say that I did this like one and done and I was home free. No, I microdosed for about 2 years, and then I stopped microdosing because I was cured, right? I was healed. So I thought, and then I kind of went back into those old habits, and I needed to, actually I went through something really traumatic year 3 of my sobriety, and I got back on an antidepressant for about 2 months. I had done so much healing that I didn't like it at all, and I ended up doing a mouth swab. This is important for you guys to know. I ended up doing and I think we've said it here on the podcast before, but I'll say it again. I ended up doing a mouth swab on my cheek to see if antidepressants were compatible with my brain. And you guys, this is available to you, but you might have to fight your doctor or your psychiatrist. Again, they don't really want you healthy, and it's not their fault, but there is no profit for them. So when I went to my psychiatrist and I told her, I said, hey man, I want to get off some of these pills. I'm on a lot and I'm barely 30. I heard that there was a mouth swab where you can see, what antidepressant, what SSRI is most compatible with my brain. And she's like, yeah, no, that test is ineffective. It doesn't work. It's ineffective. I said, okay, all right, cool. Yeah, I'd like it anyways, right? Because by then I had kind of caught on to what was going on. And she poo-pooed me on 3 different occasions. But long story longer, that ex-boyfriend of mine, Drew, he came into that office with me and he goes, hey, you don't give her the mouth swab that she's asking for, I'm going to leave here with her and I'm going to personally hire her an attorney to sue you. So I suggest you give it to her. And so she did. She swabbed my mouth and sent it out. And 2 months later, she called me in a tone that I had never heard before. And she's like, oh my God, this is like the funniest thing. But your brain is not compatible with any SSRIs at all. So I'll be taking you off immediately. Immediately means she took about a week or 2. You don't want to stop an SSRI, so they say. But so from that point on, I was like gung-ho of like, holy fuck, like any like manic episode I was ever in was not me. It was because she put me on something I wasn't supposed to be on for 10 years. So like a lot of those crazy, outlandish behaviors was because my brain chemistry was being altered. So I felt very confident and very safe starting to use something from Mother Earth. Literally, mushroom grows in the ground. It grows in the ground. It's from God. It's from Earth herself. That's so freaking cool. So I was like fully on it, like fully like, let's go. I am so curious about this microdosing. Knowing the science behind the neuroplasticity was incredible. So like when I first started microdosing, I didn't feel very good about myself. I didn't talk to myself very kindly. And so like an example would be like I'm unworthy, right? Like, well, I'm unworthy, or you're not going to find true love because you've done this, or you're your daughter's never going to love you like she used to because, you've hurt her so much because of your drinking. And so I would say these things, and although some of these things would kind of like make sense, I wasn't doing myself any favors. I wasn't healing by talking shit to myself. I wasn't healing by consistently and constantly reminding myself what a POS I was. That wasn't serving anybody, right? That was only making me feel worse about myself. And I didn't really know how to stop that because I had just become aware of my thoughts and emotions and beliefs for the first time in my life in my early 30s. So I didn't really know how to control it or stop it. And so when I started to study, you guys, when I say study, all I mean is I do a simple Google search and I read, right? And so I started to study neuroplasticity, and I started to hire coaches, like Jake and I are now. I started to invest in myself to start training my brain. I wanted to train my brain. I wanted to train my thoughts. I wanted to know which thoughts I should listen to and which ones I should completely discard, because we have both. We have both. I mean, if we listened to every single thought we had, I always crack the joke that we'd be in jail. All of us would be incarcerated. I don't think there's one person on earth that hasn't thought of killing someone else at some point in time of their life. So I started to communicate better, kinder, more positive to myself. I say I went from NMA, negative mental attitude, to PMA, positive mental attitude. And I started to just try these tools that I was learning from these coaches that I hired. I took out like a $20,000 loan against my car to invest in these high-end, top-notch coaches, and thank God I did. And so I started to, instead of using things like shame and guilt and consequences whenever I made a mistake or fucked up or messed up in life or said something I shouldn't have said or didn't show up as the best version of me, instead of beating myself up, I decided that I would try to use understanding. I would try to use compassion for myself. I would call upon grace, right? And it worked. It started to work. And it was really interesting at first because I remember wanting to like give myself a consequence, and we're conditioned this way because as children, your child messes up and the parent gives a punishment. The parent gives a consequence. So then we grow up with, oh, I messed up, consequence. Oh, I messed up, consequence. Oh, I messed up, consequence. So I started to use that as my way of being. So then when I started to try on these new emotional tools, it felt awkward. Like I remember the first time I was super rude to someone. I can't remember. It's at a restaurant. I think it was a waitress. And I always had a thing for treating waitresses really kind because I think waitressing is a really hard job. I've done it before and I was really bad at it. I was wonderful talking to people because I love talking to people, but I couldn't remember shit. So like their order was always fucked up. And so ever since that experience, I was always really kind to waitresses and I'd tip a little bit better and I'd say please and thank you a lot. But I was in a mood and I was rude to this waitress. I was like snappy. And then she went on break and I couldn't apologize. And I remember going home and I was just like, I was such a bitch to her. Like, why, Carissa? Why'd you need to be a bitch to her? Like, why'd you need to make that comment? And like, I just started ruminating, right, of how I treated this human. And it was the first time I'd only been microdosing, I think 2 weeks. And it was the first time that my heart, I don't know what exactly it is, but it was either my brain or it was my heart or it was God or it was the universe or it was my angels. I don't know because there's so much to energy that we don't know. But I just remember hearing, try compassion, try grace, try forgiveness. And I was just like, this doesn't make any sense. I was just a bitch. I need to punish myself. I need to talk shit to myself. I need to make myself feel worse. Like, that's what we do. That's what you do. You don't just treat someone rude and then love yourself through it. Like, that's dumb. That doesn't make any sense. And then when I started thinking about it, I was like, oh my God, that does make a lot more sense. Because what are the chances of me not doing it again if I forgive myself? What are the chances of me not doing that behavior again if I understand and I show myself grace? well, I think the chances of me acting out in a rude way are going to go lower if I'm being nicer and kinder to myself and I'm using tools like understanding, compassion, and forgiveness. And so I thought about it. I'm like, so if I continue to talk shit and be mean to myself, then I'm just going to feel worse about myself. And that's going to increase my chances of being a bitch again in the future, whether that's tonight, or tomorrow, or a year from now. And so I started to be able to zoom out, right? Microdosing gives you the ability to like zoom out and like look at your life and look at your behavior and look at the things you do. And that can be really hard because sometimes we see things about ourselves that we don't like. So you do have to be brave. You have to use courage. And so I started to at least see the purpose, and being a huge fan of efficiency, I was like, wow, it's way more efficient to my healing and to my personal development and to my spiritual growth to use those tools, understanding, grace, compassion, forgiveness, versus using the tools that I picked up of shame, guilt, consequence, punishment. I just started to see it from a very scientific, kind of left-brainy, neurodivergent, which I kind of have. I'm kind of growing out of it too. I'm like, oh, that makes way more sense. Huh. So my chances of not being a bitch, the next time I'm in a mood, are going to go a lot higher if I'm kind to myself. And it was recommended to me from my coach at the time to when I'm feeling bad about myself or when I'm disappointed in my behavior. And you guys, I want to talk about disappointment just for a second. We don't need to use guilt and shame. Well, we don't need to use shame, but guilt can be useful because there's kind of guilt comes before the shame. When you feel guilty, that means you're like kind of disappointed. And then you can call upon the behavior, the undesirable behavior that you don't like, and go, oh, I don't like that. I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to do better next time. And I love myself and I forgive myself. Shame is when we're internalizing it. Shame isn't, oh, I had a bad behavior. Oh, I engaged in a bad action. It's I am bad. I am bad. Right? We want to stay the hell out of shame, right? Because none of us are inherently good or bad. We just have behaviors that are either desirable and undesirable, and we are the creators of our own life. We get to choose if we want to change those behaviors, and with enough time and repetition, we can change those behaviors, and microdosing accelerates that and can get the job done a lot quicker. So for the first time in my life, well, hold on that statement. So anyways, I felt disappointed in myself. That was not the first time in my life. But when I felt that disappointment for the first time in my life, I sat down and I put my hand over my heart and I just was kind to myself. And even though I was mean to someone else, I was like, no, we didn't treat her very nice. And I really wish I wouldn't have said that. And you know what, Carissa? It's okay. It's okay. Like, you're a human. And right now, in this moment, you want to make a better choice. You want to be better in the future. You want to be kinder in the future. That right there is fucking amazing. That is huge. That is a plus. That is a win. Dr. Joe Dispenza calls that a win. Being nice to yourself. Oh yeah, you're wearing a shirt, honey. Nice. Being nice to yourself is a fucking win. Replacing love, understanding, compassion, and kindness, instead of using guilt, shame, disappointment, and ego, deciding that you're going to do that for yourself so that you can hardwire that into the brain and use that as your way of being, that is a win. That makes the world a better place. And so it just started to click of like, and granted, you don't want to go off and be like assholes to people and then go love yourself for it. No. It was a genuine mistake that I made. I was genuinely disappointed in myself, and then I genuinely made the decision to do better, and I did. That doesn't mean I'm not ever a bitch. Doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't mean that. I'm still human. I still get moody. I still have my shit. It just means that I'm more aware, and instead of being so reactive now, I get that moment of pause of like, do I want to show up as my old self, or do I want to show up as my higher self? Right? The person I'm aspired to be. And microdosing was the start of all of that for me. I didn't start macrodosing, which basically just means a large amount and having a psychedelic experience, a spiritual experience. I didn't start doing that until probably a year and a half later. So I microdosed for that year, and I slowly and surely got off all of those pills. And I'm so fucking grateful I did, because my body was starting to deteriorate, truly. So that's kind of my story about microdosing. And then with my students, everything that microdosing brings is like more energy, more creativity, clear thinking, increased problem solving skills, focus, awareness. Your heart is bigger. Literally, like your heart, well, not literally, figuratively, your heart feels more open, positive mood, greater connection with humans, with Mother Earth, with nature. I always felt like I was more present when microdosing. And then there's also been times where I'm like, oh, that was not a microdose. It was a little bit more. And we call that a museum dose. And so what that does is it just starts to, not the museum dose, but microdosing, it just starts to literally change your thinking. And when you hop on a new, I want you to kind of think of like roads. Think of having like a highway, right? Or a freeway, or a particular road that you always use to get to work. It's like, no, you go this way when you go to work. You go this way. If you went a different way one day, it feels a little weird, right? If you go to a new grocery store, you're like, oh, this is my regular grocery store. It feels kind of weird at first, but with enough repetition, what happens? It's like, okay, so let's say you think this way and you're always talking shit to yourself and you're saying things like you don't deserve forgiveness and you don't deserve that guy or that girl or that job, or you're unworthy, or whatever it is that you say to yourself. And then you make the decision to try something new. You leave this road. You're no longer on this thought frequency. You're no longer using this neural pathway. You're over here on this new neural pathway. So picture this as like your freeway. This is the highway. That shit is like, everybody goes down that road. That road's been there a bit. Everyone can see that road. It's on the map. We know where it is. Well, now you're over here. Have you guys ever gone hiking and it's like you're off the beaten trail a little bit, but you can kind of see a new trail? You're like, well, I think we can go that way, I think. And it's almost like you are creating a new neural pathway. You're going down that new hiking trail. And there's a little bit of debris. There's a little bit of brush. It's not a set road yet. It hasn't been paved. There's no asphalt. It's new. So you start going down this road, and that's the road of love, understanding, compassion, forgiveness. It's using these new tools. And then you're going to hop back on the other road and you're going to talk shit to yourself. And then it's like, nope, come back over here. And with repetition, you just keep coming back to this new road. And what happens within 90 days, you guys, 90 days of microdosing, that is it. Okay. The brain every 90 days does a scan and a prune. So just imagine every 90 days, your brain goes beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, and it does a little scan. And it's like, oh, Carissa is no longer saying she's unworthy of love. She's no longer using hate and anger and rage and disappointment. She's not so weird. She's not using this pathway anymore. She's not talking shit to herself. Oh, okay. Snip. And no joke, it freaking just snips that neural pathway away. The same way a gardener comes into your garden and it trims off all of the dead roses, it just snips it off so all the nutrients can go into the other roses, the other petals, the other stems. The brain works the exact same way. When you're no longer using this way of being, it'll snip it away in 90 days. And this is why, and it's so easy to practice those new tools when you're microdosing. This is why people change so rapidly. You guys, like we have had clients who, no joke, want to die. They want to commit suicide, right? And we will ask them, okay, well, could you maybe just wait? If you want to in a couple of months, but could you just hold off and microdose and incorporate these new ways of communicating to yourself? Because it doesn't take long. So we've had people that, no joke, want to die, and 3 months later, their life is entirely different. Not like, oh yeah, I'm a little bit better. I'm out of bed and I'm showering. No. They are hiking. They are hanging out with their children again. They are doing things with animals. Like they are loving their life again. They are engaging. They're creating the life that they really want. And it's just so rapidly that it's like, it's mind blowing. And that's why, that's the actual science behind it. And the coolest thing is, you guys, you don't have to be dependent on the microdosing. You don't have to, because it's not the little microdose that's like like changing you, it's the psilocybin that is creating the neuroplasticity. And the neuroplasticity is new hard wiring in the brain. So what that means is, so let's say 90 days go by and your life is night and day difference. I want to kind of circle back to when I said I got off the prescription pills and then I went through something traumatic and I got back on them for a month or two. So what happened was, when I had stopped microdosing, I went back to, I stopped my spiritual routine, and that wasn't because of the stopping microdosing. I had some trauma. And so I reverted back to that old way of being. I reverted back to that old way of thinking. And that might happen, right? We're humans, we're not perfect. But I didn't stay there long because of neuroplasticity. I didn't stay there long. It was only a couple of months, actually a couple of weeks, and I was like, God, I'm living my old life again. Shit. I went back to Big Pharma because it was the safe thing to do, and that's what I've done for 10 years. And I stopped my spiritual routine. I stopped microdosing. I was like, why did I stop microdosing? And so I actually got off them. I weaned off of them in like a week and then got right back onto the spiritual path, the spiritual awakening that I was on. And so you don't even have to do these things perfectly. We still can revert back to the old way of being, but the chances of you going back to sleep are very, very, very low. You might take a little nap like I did. I took a little nap for a couple of weeks and went back to that old way of being, and I didn't stay there long before that self-awareness came back and I got right back onto that spiritual path. And it's because my brain had carved out those new ways of being, and that old way of being was starting to deteriorate. So I owe so much. I owe so much to psilocybin, because my brain is the healthiest it's ever been in my entire life. Even in childhood, I had problems. And that is truly because of microdosing the last 5 years of my life.
Wow. Thank you for that. Thank you
You're
for
welcome. I just realized I've been talking for 38 minutes. I didn't know it was that long.
I didn't want to interrupt. I had some
Thank
things
you,
to
honey.
add, but
I see you writing. I see you writing over there. I see you.
That's right. Believe it or not, everybody, I'm still here, and I was here the whole time. So if you didn't, if you're listening to this, you can definitely see on YouTube that I was here the whole time. Chris and I have really learned, that when the other person's on a roll, if you interrupt that thought, man, sometimes we're like, wait, where was I? So
yeah,
I want
totally.
to make sure that I'm honoring you and letting you finish your thoughts rather than thinking I'm on the same path and then finishing your thought for you and then being wrong. And then we have that whole mess to deal with.
Thank you. I love you.
Yes. Thank you. I love you. Well, that is Carissa's story, and it is a wonderful story. And actually, we have something similar in our stories where we were both a year completely, no substances before we incorporated microdosing. But there is a lot of research out there for microdosing as helping cessation from smoking. There's out there for cessation from drinking and other addictive behaviors.
Mental illness.
But again, I just want to reiterate, intention. And she mentioned it before. If you're doing this in secret, then you might want to check your intentions. Why are we ashamed? Why are we afraid to talk about these things? What are we doing them for? And once again, with microdosing, the intention of why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it to ignore my feelings. I'm not doing it to avoid life. I'm not doing it to avoid my problems or escape. These are very important things for people, at least for myself, who comes from an addictive background. So again, this comes at a time, just so everybody knows, the year is 2024, in case you find this podcast later. At the time right now, we are, there's a lot of buzz about microdosing.
Yeah.
It is a buzzword. And the reason there's a buzz is because of documentaries like How to Change Your Mind and Fantastic Fungi.
Yes, please go watch those, you guys. You can find them in the show notes.
And there's plenty of research happening out there. Well, the research was so good that guess what? The research is so good, not everyone. Got to be careful with the always and the nevers. But the research is so promising that Big Pharma goes, hey, how can we profit from this too? And went to work immediately trying to create synthetic versions of naturally occurring substances. And now, when you start to research microdosing, the first couple pages on any major search engine is actually going to be discussing microdosing LSD. And now, when you continue to research microdosing, you're actually going to find that a lot of the current research is happening regarding a synthetic form of psilocybin. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to, but they're out there. And the reason I look at this is because I read a book a long time ago called, it was actually required reading from my father, called The Guide to a Well-Educated Mind. And it taught me how to read the research and how to look at the research and really delve deep into what are they saying, not just finding evidence to support my own pet theories, which a lot of us do, right? If I have an idea, this is the internet we're talking about. If you have an idea, you can find 15 different facts to support your case. And then if you actually flip that idea, you can find 15 different pieces of evidence that will go against your thoughts. So just so we're clear, we're talking about microdosing psilocybin, natural psilocybin. We're not talking about a synthetic. Just before I hopped on here, I was reading, there was a study. Let me stop right there, and the pause is on purpose. In order to have a study, you need to have funding. There's not a whole lot of scientists that went through school, have debt, now are having lives, have more debt, that are willing to do free research and work for free. So they need funding. Well, in order to have fundings, there's grants. In order to have grants, it's, hey, this is what we're willing to pay for. Well, where does the majority of that funding come from? I suggest you research that. Don't take our word for it. But if you don't want to, and you have too much other things to do, we'll go ahead and tell you that it is the same people that profit from us being on prescriptions and getting injections are the same people that are funding medical school and are the same people that are funding research, which is why it just came out that I think it's Coca-Cola has used Harvard to go ahead and prove that Coca-Cola is safe. So something completely not what we're talking about. But if you really think that Coca-Cola is healthy and you believe that Harvard found studies that prove that Coca-Cola is good for us,
that's evil genius. That's what I always say. I'm like, oh, that's evil genius. You're Harvard. Like, of course, people are going to be like, no, Harvard did a study.
It's happening. And honestly, when I just Googled microdosing, I did find that Harvard has studies now saying that, oh, it's not effective. It's not effective. It's just placebo. And I've actually found
what is
microdosing. And then when you continue,
but what's interesting, sorry to interrupt, honey. What's interesting is that let's say it is the placebo effect. Who gives a fuck, right? It doesn't, the change still happens, right? And so whether it's induced by your own making, because you can make things happen. That's what Dr. Joe Dispenza teaches. Or if it's the psilocybin itself, it doesn't matter. If the effects are taking place, the effects are taking place. It doesn't matter if it's you or the psilocybin.
Well, it went on to say that people who were suicidal, that a small percentage of them actually were still suicidal. So I was reading, I'm like, that's just not what we've noticed. So I kept reading, and I found out that they were actually testing, the study was done. They called it psilocybin. But if you continue reading, then you find out that it was actually a synthetic derivative. And once again, this is where people are trying to profit off of things that are just naturally occurring. And they're trying to find a way. And the reason that I believe that the reason that these things continue to get rejected by the FDA is because there is lobbyists who make a lot of money and politicians who at $225,000 a year end up as billionaires after 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 terms. These people are unable to profit from you being cured, from you being healthy, from you having no more dependency on prescription pills. Carissa mentioned prescription pills. I don't know what we call the little orangish bottle with the white cap. I call it a little bit of a bottle. I don't know, but talking to an alcoholic, a bottle means a completely different thing, but the pill container. And so when you said that you were thinking outside the box, I was like, oh, We should call it like thinking outside the pill bottle.
Thinking outside the bottle. I know exactly where you're going with that, babe.
Yeah.
I love it. Let's
So I
think
just wanna
outside the bottle. Hey, that goes for alcoholics too.
thinking outside the bottle. So
Yeah.
microdosing, again, is a
Nice.
buzzword. It's being, and with anything else, what do they want to do? They want to spin the narrative. They want to control the dialogue about microdosing. So what do? First, embrace, and then shift, and then start talking about, well, this is microdosing. And they're talking about LSD. I have a history with LSD. Carissa mentioned her story. Just so you know, when I was in high school, I did a lot of LSD. A lot. I think the most I ever did at one time was 15 hits, and I did it on Halloween. And then
And for those of us, because I don't
next
know
day I
what
went to
15 hits is that a lot? Like,
yeah.
what's the normal dose when you do
Well, and
LSD? One hit?
just so you know, anybody who is ever going to experiment with it, anyone who's ever done it recommends just half a hit. Don't take a full.
Oh my God, just spit.
And so on. And you should always have a trip sitter, and there's a whole bunch of other things that go along with that. This is not,
especially with LSD, always have a trip sitter. I've heard always, because that is such a hallucinogen.
This is not
Why,
the purpose of this
haven't done it.
podcast episode, but I just want to throw that in there. But a lot of the research right now is talking about LSD, and that is not the purpose of this particular episode. Do I think it could be done? I think LSD is an absolutely amazing thing for your brain. For a 16-year-old, probably not the best.
Yeah.
You know, we a lot of research about the developing mind until we're about 25.
What is the appropriate age to start microdosing and to start using these substances?
That's a great question. That's a really great question. I mean, I think, again, that would be between the person. If somebody, but I do know this, that you and I have really faced ourselves and faced the darkest version of ourselves, right? And so for me, I have been kind of at a life or death crossroads a couple of times in my life. And so for me, if you're seriously considering suicide, then every other option should be on the table. I mean, every other option should be on the table if you're considering suicide. So I just want to go back to microdosing real quick. The buzzwords, okay, they're shifting and controlling the narrative a little bit, and then they're ultimately going to bring something to market that is FDA approved, that is synthetic, it's not naturally occurring, and I don't believe that it is going to be as safe as nature.
Correct. Jake and I were actually talking today at breakfast, and I was telling him, I was like, well, I'm concerned with Big Pharma getting their hands on this, because what I feel, and you guys, I feel things. I don't know if you guys know about the different clairs, and we'll do an episode on that, but I am claircognizant, which means that I have knowing. I just like know things. I'm also clairaudient, and so I'll hear things. I don't see things. I don't see people. I don't see people that have transitioned. I don't see things, but I have these feelings. And I got this feeling, this overwhelming feeling of like, oh, they're going to make it in such a way so that it helps you a little bit and then doesn't actually cure you. Like they'll do something to where you feel better immediately, but no neuroplasticity actually takes place. So then real lasting change doesn't happen unless you can stay dependent on the drug, because they don't want you guys, they will lose their planes, they will lose their 10 different mansions, they will lose all of their servants that they have, they will lose everything that they have if we start to get healthy. And so they're not interested in us actually getting healthy. So when I heard Big Pharma like promoting psychedelics, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. And so the same way we have scientists that sit in a lab and they create the most perfect taste, right, for a chip, right, like Doritos. They have the highest paid scientists to make the most perfect toxic thing for us to consume to get us hooked. And so I'm like, fuck, they're going to do like the cigarettes that came out way back in the day. That was just a little bit of tobacco, right? And then it was tobacco and nicotine. And then it was tobacco and I think it's formaldehyde that like makes the cigarette burn. And so it's like the natives used to just smoke tobacco and it was something beautiful and it was something sacred. Today, they're cancer causing, right? Because they want you to keep buying the cigarettes. They don't want you to like enjoy the tobacco with your ancestors in a ceremonial setting. No, they want you fucking hooked so you're buying a pack of cigarettes every single day. And like with alcohol, right? When alcohol first came out, actually, that's not true. I don't know how long alcohol has been around. Maybe it's been since antiquity. But remember prohibition, right? Like they stopped alcohol because everybody knows alcohol is fucking poison nowadays. Like literally everybody knows that. But then when they decided, oh my God, we can't have prohibition. We got to put this back on the market. People are like, really want this stuff. We can make so much money. So now alcohol, like literally a 21-year-old can go into Costco and buy a handle of alcohol. They say that LSD is illegal because they're like, we're just scared you're going to take LSD and jump out of a window and die. Really? Because there's so many alcohol related deaths. It's fucking insane. And that is not taken off the market. You know what I mean? You don't give people a 4-drink minimum when they go to bars. You know, that's not just a standard thing. Like every bartender knows, okay, you can have 4 drinks and we're capping it because we all know you have to drive home because we're at a restaurant. You know, they don't allow, it's not like there's like limits on a 21-year-old buying alcohol. Like, no, like they're making so much money from alcohol itself, from alcohol related deaths, from them. It's a depressant. We all know it's a depressant. I guess people who are depressed drink alcohol. And so they have this information, then why it's like you can see the contradiction in the laws if you actually just kind of take a bird's eye view and see it.
If you're willing. If you're willing to look at it, okay? And folks, once again, I am a Marine. I will put my life on the line to protect America. And what I really mean is Americans. What I mean is people like you and me. I do not mean our companies. I do not mean our government. I mean our people and our freedoms. That's what I mean. So one more time, back the beware, okay? And really, so with your curiosity and your willingness, if you're willing to look at these things, please be willing to do the research. And when you're looking at the research, please be willing to look further than just a study. A study is not research. A study is a part of the process of research. And research is not science. It's only science once it has been actually proven over and over again to have no flaws in the study. Okay? So peer reviewed means that it is in the process of becoming science. Anyways, I can go down this whole thing.
I want to take that one step further. And don't just do your own research, but be open to trying it and having your own experience. Because even when it comes to science, you guys, years ago, science proved man could never fly. They said, nope, flying is left to the birds. God does not intend us to fly. We will never fly. Flight is impossible. And then you had these people that came, and actually it wasn't the Wright brothers. There was somebody right before them, and I don't know the name. But the Wright brothers came along and disproved science and said, no, I just built an airplane. Yeah, we're going to go flying. And nowadays, we fly all over the world easily, right? You just buy a ticket and boom, you fly. So even science is not definitive.
In that same process, at that time, when flight was first discovered, their government actually had provided a lot of funding, and a lot of tax dollars went into the government wanted to be in charge of flight. And actually it was proven by somebody outside of that, because sometimes scientists can become myopic. They can be looking in those microscopes and they can become very myopic. And that means narrow sighted. That means unable to see the peripheral. Yeah. All right. Once again, when we're talking about microdosing, we are talking about psilocybin. And when we're talking about microdosing psilocybin, we're talking about less than 0.3 of a gram. Okay. And many times we're talking about just 1/10 of a gram. I do not recommend synthetic, really anything. We're really trying to go natural.
Yeah, natural.
So what has microdosing really done for Jake? Microdosing has done a lot for me. First, I've always been a pretty cerebral, but then again, like I said, I did a lot of LSD when I was a teenager. And because of my weirdness, just so you know, don't even try to keep track of, like, what do they call that when something is a gateway drug? Don't even try to keep track of that for me, because my stuff
alcohol is the gateway drug. I don't give a fuck what anybody says.
Absolutely,
alcohol is the gateway.
Absolutely, and cigarettes, right?
Yes.
But
trauma's the gateway drug.
So when we're talking about this, and we started discussing it, because Carissa had brought it to my attention that people are using this for healing purposes, I was skeptical, because I've hallucinated many times, and so I was very, very, very skeptical. So I was the guy who did the research. I was the guy who did look at it, and I wanted to know why people were doing it. And I, again, because of my alcoholic nature and my desire to, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it all the way, right? When I was a Marine, the only way I would be a Marine is if I could go to combat. The I didn't really understand why somebody would do something and not get the hallucination. Why would you not want the reward, right? Like, oh my God, you're
Because it's
missing the
scary.
best part,
No,
and that's my brain. Okay. So for me, looking at
not
these
mine.
things as medicine took quite a bit of really investigation. And
Every
that's why
time we'd get in a fight, the first like 6 months of our relationship, he'd be like, I'm not doing drugs with you. Right?
you're just
Like
doing
every
your
time
drugs.
you're just doing your drugs. And finally one time I was like, listen, motherfucker, you better stop calling them drugs. Alcohol is a fucking drug. Okay? Like this is
She's
medicine
correct.
from Mother Earth. Look it up. Don't
She's
take my word for it. You look it up.
She's correct. I am a proud DARE graduate, and it stands for Drug Abuse Resistance Education. It doesn't say drug alcohol, which most people think it does. But anyway, so these things using for healing, I had to look at it. And neuroplasticity, like Carissa said, happens. Now, it happens in your brain anyway. It always happens every 90 days. Okay. However, believe it or not, Carissa is an efficiency expert. That is why some of the things that she says comes off a little bit like harsh, a little bit like cut like a hot knife through cheese or through butter. Okay. And she's like, why am I going to say all this other bullshit? Why can't I just say, yeah, you're unhealthy because this? And so
It's a gift
it is.
and a
So
curse.
neuroplasticity happens anyway. So I don't want anyone to have any misconceptions about that. It happens anyway. Your brain does it naturally. Okay. But microdosing actually helps with the ability to become the observer. And when you
Thank
are
you.
able to
Yes.
become the observer and you're able to look at yourself, okay, folks, this little finger of mine, I was pointing at everyone else for about 40 years. Okay, this little finger of mine was casting blame. And if the world would have just existed exactly the way that I think it should, based on that fucking mood I was in at that particular fucking moment in time, then I wouldn't have any fucking anger issues, right? If the world was bubble wrapped for Jake, right? And again, depending on what mood I was in that time. Because as my mood changes, I need the world to be a little changed. And I need the world to be different, right? And then as that mood changes into a different one, I need the world to be a little bit different. So it allows us to become the observer. And Carissa is one of the first people I've heard talk about this, becoming the observer, okay? Looking at yourself from the outside in. Now, back when I did LSD when I was 16, I had become the observer many times. I didn't recognize it as such. I was just having a blast, okay? Listening to Pink Floyd, freaking enjoying myself, okay? Drawing tracers with cigarettes and whatever and just enjoying it. Realizing now that I actually had done quite a bit of work with psychedelics in high school, I just wasn't using them medicinally. Now, when you
God,
start to
imagine if
become,
you were, even then.
right? Now, when you start to become the observer, it is a very, this is why working with people I think is very important, because you can very easily start to be critical. You can start to have self-love and compassion. You will cry. You will be scared. You might have all these things. Now, microdosing is supposed to allow you to have a sub-perceptible experience, but it's not saying that feelings won't come up. It's not saying
Right.
that emotions won't come up. And once again, intention, intention, intention. We are not using these substances to avoid life, to avoid conflict, to avoid anything. We're not using them to hide, to run away, to not experience. Okay, we're not using them to put a veil over our eyes so that way we can,
No, the veil will
once
be
again
removed.
avoid the hard, difficult things that we really, are kind of accepting in our lives that we shouldn't be. I don't know if any of you have that, but a lot of us have places where we're actually accepting things that we shouldn't be accepting. And when you become the observer and you're not avoiding feelings, okay, you will start to heal yourself. You'll start to have this accountability factor. You'll start to look at your own behavior. You'll start to see your part in the dysfunction in your life. And so instead of pointing the
So
finger
beautiful.
at all the other people, you start to go, oh, okay, I need to accept some of my role in the dysfunction. And you also see their role. You don't, okay, this is important. In any dysfunction, especially in an interpersonal relationship, right, with anyone, family, friend, coach, whatever, a parent, whatever, spouse, it's important to know that it is not just you, it is also them. Okay. So multiple people need to be there. So if you're constantly, I'm just going to give you something for free here, but if you're constantly coming to the table and the other person is not, and you're constantly coming to the table and trying to own your shit, and the other person is just gobbling it up and never takes accountability, that is a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care who the relationship is with. I have that relationship with people where I continue to come to the table and they continue to eat it up and tell me more of my bullshit, as if I didn't fucking live the first 40 years of my life. I know my bullshit. I know my faults. I know where I went wrong. I'm here to accept and move forward.
And do
I'm
better.
going to continue to evolve. I'm going to continue to grow. As I continue to evolve, as I continue to grow, I am going to have some successes, and I'm also going to make some mistakes, and all of that is okay. All right. Now, again, for me, my story, I was a feeling avoider for the first half of my life. I was a feeling avoider for the first half of my life. That is why I used alcohol and substances, is because I really wanted to avoid the real F word, feelings. Feelings. I wanted to avoid feelings. I had a lot of feelings that were not processed, even though I had spent a lot of time in therapy. And I mention this because if you're like this might resonate. I spent a lot of time in therapy, and unfortunately, I mean, talk about treating symptoms. I just would, it was all surface level shit. I didn't want to go, why does everybody want to talk about my childhood? There's nothing there. There's nothing there that I haven't dealt with. Okay. I'm adopted.
Sure.
Okay. I'm adopted, and was adopted as an infant. And at 2 years old, my brother was found in the middle of Lake Michigan with sunburns by the Coast Guard and everything. And I was put in hot baths and scalded, and we had all kinds of other things. None of that. And then the family that I was brought into was a little bit,
Yep.
we'll call it nomadic. But I did what we all exist, and again, I'm reading Gabor Mate, I'm leading the mastery of self. Okay. What we all experience when we are very, very young is survival, and we learn how to survive in our environments. And our parents learned how to survive in their environments, and their parents learned how to survive in their environments. And it's not very long before you get into some people that like experienced the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
It's not very long before you experience people who literally were being told duck and cover if an atomic bomb hits. It's not very long before you get into people who survived the Great Depression, right?
Well, yeah, it's like especially for women, like 3 people ago, for me, 3 generations ago, women did not even have status unless they had a husband. You know what I
Right.
mean? They couldn't work. They couldn't like even buy things at a grocery store at the age of 25 unless they had a husband. You know what I mean? So we've all got some stuff. This is called epigenetics.
We've
We
all got some
shit.
stuff.
Yeah.
And so in taking accountability for my role, at the same time, not excusing, but understanding the role of others, right? And their own stuff. Microdosing can really help with that level of self-compassion that Carissa talked about. Now, let me just briefly talk about that and how you get to self-compassion and self-forgiveness. Because if you're where I was, which was the director of blame and shame and guilt, because I have massive survivor's guilt. I have massive survival's guilt just because of the fact that, like, my adopted family, I have a brother, and he was in foster care too, and I was chosen, and then he wasn't, and then he was chosen, and he came to live with us, But then he was also sent back to foster care when they were going through a divorce. And I was 6 years old. And my parents were trying to process their own emotions. And my sisters were trying to process their own emotions. So where does that leave someone? Where does that leave a little boy? Right? So again, no blame and shame. This is all people experiencing life, experiencing Earth. Okay? But what we end up learning as we continue to read, I'm gonna fast forward a whole bunch here. When I first got into rehab, and my counselor's like, Jake, you got to show yourself grace. And I said, Marva, that's not going to happen. That's for those other people. And she'd smile and she'd say, no, Jake, we got to show yourself grace. And I appreciate the wisdom in that. She didn't say we have to forgive yourself, because there's no fucking way I would have been able to make that jump.
Too much.
That is too much. So how do we get there? She said, we got to show ourselves grace. That didn't come for a long time. That didn't come for many, many, many months, couple years. I mean, I don't know. I don't think that happened until my first experience with MDMA assisted therapy. Different podcast. I think we already talked about it if you've been listening. But what you learn with microdosing, this subperceptible amount, these little thoughts, right? We only have about 70,000 thoughts a day. As you have your thoughts, you're going to start noticing these conditions that we've placed on love. And these conditions that we've placed on love were actually programmed. We were taught them. Okay? We were taught these conditions. It is called conditional love. I've read it in many books. I've seen it all over the place. We were taught conditional love, and we were taught how to survive our environments. And we learned that I need to act a certain way in order to survive this environment. That is conditions. That is conditional love. And when you start looking at yourself and realize that you've been actually, we've kind of talked about it, that one, we got the angel and the demon on our shoulders, right? We got the one voice that's kind of nice and the other voice that's kind of harsh, right? And both of them are important. Don't deny either of them, okay? As we start to listen to these things, the conditional love is sometimes starts speaking louder than the unconditional love. And when your conditional love starts speaking louder than your unconditional love, you start to feel very judged. And then you start to judge yourself, and you actually start to handcuff yourself. And you're actually limiting yourself. Our opening, limiting beliefs, breaking free from limiting beliefs. We're talking about breaking free from conditional love. And when you get into a place of unconditional self-love, oh my God.
Freedom.
That's quantum leap that we're talking about.
Yep.
Unconditional self-love. That doesn't mean you can go out like a freaking boy going through puberty and just tear through the world. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about looking at your actions and realizing, wow, that was my level of consciousness at that time in my life. And if you're looking at somebody else, you can say, wow, that was their level of consciousness at that time in their life. And you go, wow, okay. And you look at it and you process it. Might cry, might be angry, you might be sad, you might be all the feelings, okay? And then you might notice, wow, that was that person's level of consciousness at that time. And you start showing them grace, and you start showing yourself grace. And over time, perhaps, maybe with growth, with patience, with time, maybe that grace turns into a level of understanding. And then maybe that level of understanding turns into a level of forgiveness. And again, that's not a requirement. It's just something that just sort of naturally happens. And I believe that microdosing is a really important tool that can help you get to that point, especially if you're unable to see your own shit.
Yeah. Oh.
If you're unable to see your own shit. And we've even touch on something that Carissa talked about earlier. Like she said, we've worked with a few people that have been suicidal. I don't know if you guys know the stats on veteran suicide, but look them up.
They're high.
But it's not just veterans. It's moms. It's sisters. It's daughters. It's husbands. It's wives, right? Lawyers, cops, first responders, nurses, people that live a life in service that don't even realize that they're actually just constantly, constantly in this state of conditional love. If I work harder, then people will love me more. If I do this more, then people will love me more. If I make more money, then people will love me more. Like all these conditions that people put on us and we put on ourselves, right?
Well, and so society kind of glamorizes selflessness, like,
Mm,
oh, this mother, she's just so selfless.
mm,
And it's like, okay, good. So this mother is totally detached from herself, her own body, her own needs, her own emotions. And she's just doing everything for her husband, her friends, and her children, her work. And it's like, and that's a good thing. And then we
right.
condemn the selfishness. Like, no, I can't actually do that. I'm taking time for myself. Well, it must be nice. I used to have those friends where I'd be taking a nap during the day and they'd make those comments like, well, it must be nice. And it's like, I'm sorry that I'm choosing my life and my career, and you're choosing your life and your career. And if you can't nap during the day, that's because you chose it. You're choosing the career that you have, you know?
Never
So it's like,
mind that there's a good portion of the world that actually incorporate naps into their day and into their
right.
schedules, and those people don't have the scourge of diseases that we have.
Correct.
So, yeah, as we are able to become the observer and able to look at ourselves, and you might be able to make that quantum leap like Carissa was talking about, where you see the path that you're on, and then you start to notice that there's another path. There's another path over there. And just like that scene in The Matrix where she says, you've been down that road, you know where it goes. I'm dating myself here, actually. Not everybody might have seen the original Matrix, but anyways.
But you should.
But you should. When you start to see that other path, folks, then you have a choice. And some people, a lot of the people that we're working with that are suicidal, have forgotten that you are gifted with choice.
Mm-hmm.
You have a
babe,
choice.
I'm so happy you said that.
And at any time, you can start to make different choices. And anybody who is trying to say, no, you can't make those choices, don't you remember who you are, might be part of the problem. It might be part of the conditional love problem. And that's okay. And so you go, oh, thank you. Thank you for reminding me who I've been. Thank you. I know who I've been, but thank you for reminding me who I've been. I'm actually trying to be a different person now. I'm actually trying to grow and evolve and move past that and continue my learning and continue my level of understanding about myself and the planet and my role in it.
Yes.
So once again, neuroplasticity happens regardless. And that's where actually there's a danger. Because if neuroplasticity happens anyway, then either we are reinforcing limiting beliefs or we are breaking free from limiting beliefs. And we have to actually practice it every single day because it takes 90 days before the pruning happens. Just so everybody knows, in 2003, we took over Iraq in 27 days. Basically, like neuroplasticity happens 3 times longer than it takes for us to take over a country. So it does take a little bit, but then again, zoom out. 90 days, that's 3 months from now. I want you to look back to 3 months ago. Where were you 3 months ago? Were you exactly where you are now? If so, that should scare the shit out of you. Is your relationship where it was 3 months ago? Well, if you have a beautiful, wonderful, fulfilling relationship, then that's wonderful, and I'm so happy for you.
Mm-hmm.
If your relationship has things that you don't like about it, and it's the same 90 days ago, then we got to look for that accountability. We got to look for my role in it. What am I tolerating that I shouldn't be? Where are there things that I know that there's flaws that I actually should be speaking up? But because I'm so afraid of conditional love, I don't. We really need to address our fears, folks. Microdosing, I think, really helps us address our fears. As you become looking at the observer, you're able to say, oh, wow, hang on a second. Like if I go start that new business venture,
Yeah.
what, oh my God, what happens?
Yeah.
How about I just stay where I'm at
Mm-hmm.
and I'll receive my paycheck and I'll be a good little boy and I'll get rewarded 2 weeks of vacation. paid time off sick, because believe me, when you're an entrepreneur, you don't get that shit. And
Freedom
the
comes in
fear,
other ways.
yes, and the fear can start to keep us in this hypnotic rhythm.
Safe.
Safe.
Small. I'm happy
Mhm.
that you touched on that, honey. I want to say something really quick because that is actually how the mind is wired. We're going to do a whole episode on the mind soon. But the mind is comprised of two parts. So you have the conscious mind, you have the subconscious mind. And when we first came to Earth, however long ago, right? That's controversial and it's debatable. But we all know that there was once cavemen and cavewomen. And so the mind still works the exact same way as it did before antiquity, which is, okay, I'm going out of the cave today. I'm going hunting because my wife and baby need food. And so, like, when you roll open that stone door, I always think about, like, that stone door that Jesus had, when they would, that you see in those kids' movie, so, like, open the stone door. The man is not going out. The mind is not operating in wow, look at that big, beautiful sky. And, look at all these beautiful creatures here. Fuck no. The mind is not wired to look for happiness. The mind is not wired to keep you happy. The mind is wired to keep you safe, period. It is wired to look for danger. It is wired to look for threats. It is wired to look for the bad because it's there to protect you. It's actually a really beautiful way when you think about it. But the trick here is we are not living in caves anymore. And so now it's wired to look for threats of, like, the relationship we're in, or the bills that are on the table, or the weight that we have on our body. Like, it's wired to look for perceived danger, and it keeps us in a survival mode. It keeps us living in survival because nowadays we have so much stimulation. And so we have to go in there and train the mind. I have a little course on this. It's literally called Make Your Brain Your Bitch. And so just knowing that, okay, thank you, brain. Thank you for scanning for danger. Thank you so much. And then boom, you want to flip that, right? NMA, negative mental attitude, to PMA, positive mental attitude. So you do your scanning for danger. You put your hand over your heart. You're like, okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you, brain. Thank you for telling me I'm safe. Now let's scan for happiness. And so it's really important that we understand this so that we can have mind mastery. So we can have mastery over our thoughts, beliefs, and emotions. And it's not our fault, right, that we scan for danger. It's actually a beautiful thing that keeps us, one, alive, and two, safe. But if it's not in check, it will keep us living an extremely small, automated, systematic, robotic type life and not take those calculated, thought out risks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I know we've touched on a lot, and I think we're at hour 20. What?
Easy to do. It's easy to do. We're
Easy to
talkers.
do. So last thing, there's a couple things here, but if you're microdosing and you're not doing it with a guided mentor, if you're not doing it with somebody, okay, and you're having all these thoughts, it's very easy to, if you're microdosing, you're probably noticing, you're like, wow, I am literally standing at a trailhead every single day. What path do I walk down? Do I walk down that one? Do I walk down that one? I don't know. Which one do I walk down? So just a bit of advice. The thoughts that kind of keep coming up and keep nagging you are the ones that you kind of want to go with, right?
Yeah,
The
you
ones
wanna
that
address
keep
those.
coming up and keep nagging you. Okay. Secondly, Carissa talks about this all the time. Get out of the mind and get into the body.
Into the heart.
Mm. You want to say something about that?
Well, other than just, and I think we've said it before, but the heart actually has more neurons than the brain. This is not my opinion. This is factual, right? A great website for that is
Heart
the
Mind
Heart.
Institute.
Thanks, babe. The Heart Math Institute. And so the heart actually has something called the heart brain. So it contains more neurons than the brain. And so what do you want? Who do you want making what do you want making your decisions? Something with more or less neurons, And so the mind, because it's there to keep you safe, it tells you, yeah. No. You can't become your own boss. You can't start that dream. You need to make sure that you have that paycheck. And so it tricks you into using logic and reason, which keeps you safe, right? But your heart, your intuition will go, No, 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 no. You start that dream job. No, no, no. You start that dream business and it will all work out. Right. And then the mind comes in and goes, oh, no, 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 no. But what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And it gives you all the really good reasons, like legitimate reasons as to why you shouldn't do something. Because it's like, oh, it makes sense, but that's what keeps you small. That's what keeps you unfulfilled. That's what keeps all of us, not all of us, many of us unhappy in life, because listening to the heart is risky business, man. It's scary. You have to be brave and you probably will fail. And the coolest thing about failure is we're so conditioned to think that failing is bad. All failing is checking one possible way to do something off the box. Off the box? Out of the box.
Off the list.
Off the list. Like, oh, I failed at that. Okay, cool. So that's the wrong way to do this. Cool. Got it. And then you do it again. You do it again. But grade school unfortunately conditioned us to think that failure is the end result. Can you imagine if the Wright brothers said that? We wouldn't be flying today.
Or if Henry Ford said that.
Oh, yeah, any of the best inventors of all time.
Yes. And I'm going to end with this, or I'm going to be done at this. But if you're not listening to your body and your heart and mind are not in cohesion, I'm learning a lot about healing. And what I'm finding is that if that is not in cohesion, it will express itself in the form of disease. It will express itself dis-ease, as Carissa taught me. I'm sure she heard it somewhere else, but she taught me, and I want to give her credit. Literally, if you are ignoring what's going on in your body and you do it at a chronic level, you will end up with autoimmune disease. This is fact. Yep. This is not my opinion. This is research done.
It'll manifest in the body.
Gabor Mate's book that I'm reading, The Myth of Normal, it will manifest itself in the body. We have been taught chronic conditional love, and we absolutely should be helping our children find unconditional love. So that way we can break this generational trauma and we can start helping New Earth, because it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah, the age of Aquarius is coming.
So,
well,
anything more to add, dear?
No, just, well, yes. Okay, yes. So if you guys are asking where to get microdoses, we have so many different links. We have a guy that we love, that we trust. He is amazing. He sings to the mushrooms that he grows. He talks to them. He plays music for them. And I don't know if you guys know, but any type of living being, whether it's cannabis, whether it's an animal, whether it's fungus like mushroom, these are sentient beings, right? So even water. Yes, you're right, honey. Like the more love, the more attention, the more care they get, it affects the cells of that living being. And so where we get our microdoses is from him. We would be more than happy to provide that information to you. Again, send us an email, Carissa@loveyourselfagain.com. And I got to plug our newest signature course, Microdose to Manifest. That starts September 30th. If anybody is interested in guided and intentional microdosing course, we have access to all of that information. I would love to send you guys the link. Again, either comment below here on YouTube or Spotify, wherever you're listening, or again, send us an email, Carissa@loveyourselfagain.com. You just say, hey, listen to your podcast, curious about what you guys got going on, and Jake or I or one of our assistants will be more than happy to answer any questions you guys have. We keep our prices reasonable because we feel really, really passionate about people having access to these products and really getting the same benefit that we've gotten in our life.
And if you do find this podcast or find this after the fact, send an email anyway, because it will be available after the fact.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you once again for joining us.
Great job, honey.
Absolutely. And, we would love to hear your comments. We would love to hear your comments. Go ahead and put your comments down there so that way we can see them, review them, and so on.
Yeah, actually, that's a great way to support us, too, is by subscribing, is by leaving comments, by downloading. That is the best way to support us here, and it helps our business grow so that we can bring this information, free consumer information, to more people.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you very much once again.
Bye, you guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a great day.